Welcome to Case in Point, produced by the University of Pennsylvania Law School in collaboration with Bloomberg Law. I'm your host, Jennifer Leonard. Today we'll be talking about legal employment trends among law graduates, and specifically about JD Advantage jobs. To walk us through this new topic, we have joining us here today Penn Law's Associate Dean for Professional and Student Engagement, Heather Fatone, and Casey Sullivan, a reporter for Bloomberg Law and editor of the Bloomberg Big Law Business website. Thank you for joining us. So there's been a lot of discussion lately about how we're in a transformative period in the law and in legal education. As you know, Bloomberg Law recently published an article about JD Advantage jobs. I'd like to talk a little bit about what these jobs are and why this category is important. Heather, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. So the JD Advantage category is used in law school reporting to the American Bar Association, U.S. News and World Report, and it's a category designated for jobs or careers or opportunities where a legal education is a benefit. It helps you do the job better. It is literally means your JD gives you an advantage in doing that job, but it is not required.
Okay, so it's a complement to your traditional legal education that gives you something extra in the market.
Yes, the employers who hire students in that category typically have determined that the legal education will provide the employees something that will help them add a different kind of value to the role that maybe was typically held by a PhD or an MBA, and it will enable them to do the job better, more efficiently, in a different way.
Great, thanks. Casey, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add about the category or your thoughts about JD Advantage.
Sure. Stephanie Russell Kraft wrote a great story for us about this topic, and it basically JD Advantage jobs can include anything from legal journalists, consultants to law firms, legal recruiters, but basically everything that any job that you would apply for where your JD would put you in an advantageous position, but you wouldn't be required to have a JD. So, law students go to law school typically to graduate and get a job at a large law firm. Not all of them do, but these roles seem to be becoming more and more. Students seem to be taking more of these positions because the legal market has been in, I guess, a state of change over the past 5 to 10 years. And there's been sort of a rise in legal technology that has introduced new jobs to the market. And there have been, I guess, immediately after the recession, there were quite a dramatic reduction in the amount of jobs at these major law firms. That seems to be coming back, but there has just been more JD Advantage jobs out there, and it's also something that law schools are responding to by introducing different curriculum into their courses, teaching students about technology and things like that.
At a place like Penn, that is a cross-disciplinary law school, a lot of our students are pursuing degrees, both a JD and another degree, an MBA, a master's in education or in government policy. And a lot of those students are the ones who will consider the JD Advantage jobs for us. It's typically in areas like investment banking, policy work, consulting, accounting. And it has been sort of a hallmark for us, given our cross-disciplinary nature and how our students are getting the JD as well as a complementary degree.
Great, thank you. So now that we have kind of a baseline understanding of what JD Advantage is, what it means in our world at Penn Law, Casey, you have a little bit of a bird's eye view of the discussion going on in the legal job market. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the debate around the terminology JD Advantage? What are people talking about in the legal sphere about new grads pursuing JD with these distinct advantages versus traditional JDs for a full-time bar passage required job?
Sure. So it's kind of a little bit of a sensitive topic because law schools report their figures to the ABA in terms of what kinds of jobs their graduates are getting. So law schools want to be able to report that their graduates are getting top jobs at major law firms and are practicing law. But that isn't always necessarily the case, obviously. And, students, for one reason or another, whether they are interested in another career path, or, that there's just an interesting opportunity that arises, may choose to do something else. So, deans have sort of been straddling this line of being able to offer kind of alternative courses to their students, while also sort of not taking an optics knock for sort of accepting the fact that their schools, students at their schools can go to learn these other skill sets outside of strictly practicing law, to perhaps do something outside of your traditional, like become an associate at a major law.
Thank you. And, I think one of the challenges with this new terminology is that it encompasses so many different types of positions to which a JD will bring you an advantage. But the difficulty is talking about all of those positions in one single pot. Heather, could you talk a little bit about how at Penn Law we view the JD advantage as something, that is comparable with respect to being a high-end elite profession, the type of which our students are accustomed to pursuing in the legal law firm market, versus something else?
Yes, absolutely. So typically our students who pursue the JD Advantage jobs are doing sort of elite, competitive types of opportunities like investment banking, management consulting, working at one of the big four accounting firms, policy work at a top-notch policy or regulatory organization. Typically the salaries for these jobs are either consistent with our median law firm salary or higher than that. And oftentimes these are the jobs that the students came in wanting to get, particularly with our JD MBAs, for example. They come here knowing they're getting the MBA, the JD, and they know they want to go into the business sector. This is what they came here for. It's not an alternative to a big law job. It really is what their initial goal that they set out for was. We also have a bunch of students, or a handful over the last couple of years, who have engaged in private equity, venture capital, jobs that are really hard for MBAs to get, and that our JD students and or JD MBAs are finding great success in getting those jobs and then in producing once they're in them.
Great, thank you. And, I think there is a great deal of change, not only on the horizon, but already here in the legal market. And I think in the next 1 to 2 to 5 years out, we're going to see even more change. So, Casey, I'd like to start with you. Where do you see this debate headed in the next year or two? And where do you see the legal market headed?
Sure. So from my standpoint, I have traditionally covered the business of large law firms, and more recently have been covering in-house counsel. But what we've seen is like increased consolidation of legal services at high-end law. I guess you would categorize it by like the top 100 largest law firms. So we're seeing a lot of mergers happen in that area. And that's typically happening in areas where you see more commoditized type work, labor and employment, for instance. But, I think that there will always be a need and an appetite for, high-end legal services at like the very top firms. I don't see that going anywhere. But where I see there being change, and, this is sort of turned up in our reporting, is that, with developments in technology, and also outsourcing of legal services to, they call them LPOs, legal process outsourcing companies, such as Pangea 3. And there has really been this rise of this new industry that focuses and specializes in things like document review, due diligence, and M&A transactions. A lot of that work is going to those companies that specialize in those things, where you don't have a traditional sort of like associate partner track at a major law firm, but they basically are taking up associate work that would traditionally have been done by these major law firms. So you're sort of seeing a tightening in that areas. So, but at the same time, it's also creating new opportunities. If a law student wants to sort of explore more of an entrepreneurial path out of school as opposed to going the traditional route, there seem to be like more job opportunities there. Like an industry that I've had insight into is like recruiting and consulting of law firms, and like these people earn just as much sometimes, if not more, than partners at the largest law firms around. So like there's basically, I would say like there seem to be more opportunities out there for law graduates, depending on what they're looking for.
Pangea 3 is a great example of a JD Advantage job for Penn Law, as it was founded by our graduates.
And Heather, I'd love to get your take too, because I know you and I spend a great deal of our professional relationship together discussing and debating where we think the legal market's going. What do you see in the immediate and short-term future for JD Advantage jobs? Do you see an uptick in law school interest in expanding those jobs, in incoming students pursuing those jobs more than the traditional law firm route?
Well, as you know, I think the JD degree or the legal education is kind of the best graduate education you can get to prepare you not only for traditional practice of law, but for many of these opportunities that our students are pursuing. The way you learn to think in law school prepares you for a lot more than just traditional practice of law. So I think that we have always focused on making sure our students are prepared for the types of careers that they seek when they walk through the door. Oftentimes this will change when students are here and they learn of the many opportunities available to them. But we have seen a growing interest of our students in things like management consulting, and with consulting firms understanding we want to recruit JDs separately, that's created more opportunities for our students. So we're hopeful that a broader array of employers, and we're sort of out there actively selling that, but that a broader array of employers will understand the value of a JD degree and do a little bit of what the consulting firms have done and say, we want to recruit JD specifically because of the type of education that they get and the value that they add to our practice.
Great. So, we're talking a little bit about what incoming students are thinking about doing with their degree, and then what outgoing students are actually starting to do with their degree. While they're with us in the building for the 3 or so years they are, can you talk a little bit about the skills that we're helping them equip themselves with so that they're prepared in whatever professional arena they join at graduation?
Absolutely. So through our Center on Professionalism, we have been focusing for the last a lot of years, 7, 8 years, on a broad array of business skills, making sure our students have the opportunity to develop these skills, not only for practice of law, but for many of these other opportunities that they'll pursue either immediately upon graduation or some point down the road. Thinking about how our students communicate across professions, how they communicate within their organizations, outside of their organizations, how they work in teams, how they collaborate. We're hearing more and more that not only in the traditional practice of law, collaboration is increasingly important, but in all these other arenas, being a collaborative team member is pretty critical to your success. Problem solving, and as Casey mentioned, technology skills have become increasingly important and something that we've focused on a lot through the Center on Professionalism, making sure that our students have not only a basic foundation, but in many cases more advanced abilities.
Great. Very different legal education than years past. And Casey, I want to bring it back to you. An article over the past summer looked at whether lawyers make good CEOs. So you're a legal journalist and editor of Bloomberg Big Law Business. What's your view on that?
I read that article and I saw that they looked at something like 3,500 CEOs and only 9% had law degrees. It's an interesting question. I think that one thing that came to mind when I read that was, look at a law firm like Dewey and LaBeouf, which was this major legal institution. And as a result of, as a number of people have said, financial mismanagement of the firm, it went under. And so from my point of view, I haven't necessarily seen, and I think that this is based on my reporting, lawyers to traditionally be great business managers. They're just not, that's not their education. They're trained to be, risk adverse, which means that they, will certainly do things safely but at the same time, if you have a CEO lawyer, as that article suggested, you won't necessarily have the most innovative business strategy coming out to market with products that that you necessarily need to. One thing that I've heard from GCs at Fortune 500 companies is that there's this tension between the legal side and the business side, and when they go to market with a new product, the legal side traditionally wants to sort of take things slow, and there's friction there. So, based on my reporting, I don't know if that's an answer one way or the other, but I think that there's pros and cons to each side from what I've seen.
All right. Well, this was a really great conversation. Thank you both for joining us today. It's a topic we'll certainly be following closely and adapting to here at Penn Law. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Case in Point.